Millionaire cut off his pregnant wife's credit cards, then took his mistress on a luxury vacation. They say money changes everything, but what if it changes you so profoundly that it becomes your ultimate downfall? Picture a luxurious Manhattan penthouse overlooking the city's glittering skyline, where Donovan Ashford, a millionaire investment guru, leads a life of privilege. At his side until recently was his devoted pregnant wife, Cassandra, radiant and hopeful for the future. But beneath the glow of gold and marble lies a chilling secret. Donovan has just cut off Cassandra's credit cards without warning, leaving her stranded and vulnerable. Little does he know, what follows will be a chain of betrayals, revelations, and devastating karma no amount of money can avoid. Donovan Ashford had once been a source of endless fascination for gossip columns. Growing up in an affluent family, he inherited not only a robust trust fund, but also uncanny charisma and the insatiable drive to expand the fortune he was born into. He was the kind of man who married in a flurry of paparazzi flashes and socialite buzz. His wedding to Cassandra Street James, a rising star in Manhattan's fashion scene, had been the talk of the season. Their romance was steeped in all the markers of high society: lavish parties at the Plaza Hotel, exclusive yacht soirees, and philanthropic galas. Yet beneath the veneer of sophistication, Donovan harbored a vindictive streak. He reveled in power plays, negotiations where he always emerged the winner both in business and personal relationships. Cassandra, by contrast, was gentle and unassuming. Despite her family ties to high society, she had been raised with a set of genuine values. She believed wholeheartedly in love, loyalty, and fairness. Even as her friends warned her about Donovan's rumored affairs and sometimes merciless approach to business, she chalked it up to gossip and jealousy. She saw his confidence as ambition and his sharp words as evidence of a focused mind. Months into their marriage, Cassandra discovered she was pregnant. It was a moment of both joy and apprehension for her. She didn't know how Donovan would react, as he had never truly expressed a desire to become a father. She told him the news during an intimate dinner at their penthouse, expecting a tearful, joyous reaction or at least a semblance of warmth. Instead, he merely pursed his lips, asked her if she was sure, and then excused himself to attend an urgent business call. It was a subtle omen. Soon, all illusions of marital bliss would begin to unravel. Life as a pregnant wife in the Ashford household was more isolating than Cassandra had imagined. Donovan had grown increasingly distant since she told him about the baby. He still attended social events with her, but the affectionate gestures and playful banter they once shared were now replaced by polite smiles and brittle civility. Their nights ended earlier, with Donovan often retreating to his separate study under the guise of handling urgent deals that simply couldn't wait. Cassandra tried to convince herself this was just a passing phase. Maybe Donovan was grappling with the impending responsibility of fatherhood. Perhaps it was a complex mix of fear and unspoken vulnerability. She tried to be patient, to show him that she was there for him no matter what. But as her belly grew, so did her suspicions. One evening, after a particularly uncomfortable gala where Donovan barely acknowledged her presence, Cassandra's pregnancy cravings had her scouring the freezer for mint chocolate chip ice cream. That's when her phone buzzed. A message from one of her old friends, Ingrid, flashed on the screen. "I saw Donovan at the Mark Hotel bar with some stunning brunette. Are you okay?" Cassandra's heart pounded. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but couldn't ignore the image searing into her mind, the possibility of Donovan sharing whispered secrets with another woman in one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel bars. She told herself maybe it was just a business associate, but Ingrid was never one to exaggerate. Sleep came slowly that night. The next morning, when Cassandra tried to clarify with Donovan, he brushed it off. "I meet plenty of people for business," he said, stifling a yawn. She considered pressing him, but she knew from his stony expression that her questions were unwelcome. Another seed of doubt was planted, silently growing in the darkness of her lonely nights. Still, she never imagined things could spiral to the extent that he'd cut her off financially. Not until it happened. The moment Cassandra realized her credit cards were suddenly invalid was as ordinary and jarring as any daily task. She had decided to pick up some baby necessities from Bergdorf Goodman, eager to nest and ensure her future child's comfort. Standing at the register with arms full of soft blankets and newborn outfits, she handed the shiny platinum card to the cashier with a friendly smile. The cashier slid it, frowned, and quietly said, "I'm sorry, Miss S. Ashford. It seems the card has been declined. Would you like to try another?" Mortified, Cassandra quickly offered another card. Declined. She tried a third, but the result was the same. A flush of embarrassment burned her cheeks. An older woman in line behind her recognized her face after all. The Ashford name was not unknown in certain circles, and offered a sympathetic glance. Cassandra forced a smile, whispered a polite apology, and left the store with empty hands and a hollow feeling in her chest. In the privacy of the waiting town car outside, her hands shook as she dialed Donovan's number. Voicemail. She called the family's personal banker, only to be informed that all her accounts had been placed under a temporary freeze by Donovan's explicit instructions. The banker, sounding nervous, advised her to speak with her husband directly. Cassandra's mind spun. Why would Donovan do this without telling her? She reminded herself to stay calm. Stress was the last thing she needed while pregnant. Perhaps it was all a mistake. As the driver navigated the congested streets back to their penthouse, Cassandra stared out the window in stunned silence. Manhattan skyscrapers blurred past, a harsh reminder of the lofty life that now felt precariously balanced on the whims of one man's decisions. When she finally arrived home, she marched straight to Donovan's study, only to discover it locked. He wasn't even there. Little did she know he was half a world away, indulging in a sinful escape. Donovan Ashford wasn't particularly skilled at hiding his extracurricular affairs, yet he managed to keep Cassandra in the dark for far longer than one would expect. One reason: resources. He had the money and the connections to cover his tracks. Another reason: Cassandra's trusting nature. She wanted to believe in the good in people, especially her husband. When he left Manhattan, under the pretense of securing an overseas investment, the reality was far different. Donovan had whisked away his mistress, Marissa Bloom, a socialite and up-and-coming influencer, to a luxury vacation in Bali. Specifically, they'd checked into the Ritz-Carlton, Bali, famed for its cliff-top villas that offered breathtaking views of the Indian Ocean. It was the kind of place honeymooners booked for once in a lifetime trips. Donovan, of course, planned to make an extravagant impression. In the gleaming marble lobby, a receptionist greeted them with floral lees and icy welcome drinks. Marissa twirled into Donovan's arms, snapping selfies against the sunset backdrop. She wore a diamond tennis bracelet that he'd gifted her on the flight over, a piece she flaunted unapologetically. Donovan soaked in the attention. Adrenaline spiked through him at the thought of how scandalous it all was, spoiling his mistress while leaving his pregnant wife in Manhattan to fend for herself. Donovan chose to freeze Cassandra's credit lines right before boarding the plane, hoping to send her a clear message about who held the power in their marriage. It had become a twisted game for him, a test to see just how far he could push her. He knew she was pregnant. He also knew she had nowhere else to turn in this critical time. What he didn't anticipate was how swiftly the seeds of his own undoing would be sown. Temptation, betrayal, and fate are an unstoppable trio when they decide to converge. And in Donovan's case, the countdown to karmic retribution had already begun. Cassandra felt as though the walls of the penthouse were closing in on her. She tried calling Donovan's phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. Trying not to panic, she paced the living room, her mind whirring with questions and anxieties. Yes, she had her own limited savings from her previous fashion gigs, but it was meager compared to the lifestyle Donovan had encouraged. Most of her finances had been merged into their joint accounts when they married. That, she realized with chilling clarity, was a critical error. Anxiety gnawed at her. Her pregnancy was in its second trimester, a time when her stress levels were supposed to be minimized. She remembered the doctor's warnings about hypertension and the toll that chronic worry could take on both mother and child. With every unanswered call and text, her anger at Donovan deepened, clashing with the heartbreak she felt over his betrayal. She confided in her closest friend, Mia, whose fury was immediate. "He froze your credit cards while you're pregnant, then disappeared." "Cassandra, this is emotional abuse," Mia said, her voice trembling with indignation. Mia insisted she move out for a few days, at least to clear her head. However, Cassandra was terrified of leaving her home. Something about her upbringing, her sense of marital duty, and her fragile hope that Donovan might return with an explanation or even an apology kept her rooted. The next day, when no sign of Donovan materialized, Cassandra visited her obstetrician. With tears brimming in her eyes, she confided in the doctor about her escalating stress. He recommended rest, calm, and a stable environment. She managed to settle her outstanding medical bills with the help of her personal emergency fund, which felt both humiliating and empowering. She didn't want to rely on Donovan for her prenatal care. The thought made her blood boil. Meanwhile, Cassandra told herself she needed to think logically. She had to plan for the future. On the ride home from the clinic, she drafted a mental list: find a lawyer, contact a financial advisor, and reach out to her family people she had always avoided worrying, but now needed more than ever. Marissa Bloom was not a woman to be overlooked. She possessed an uncanny knack for capturing people's attention, especially wealthy men. A former runway model turned social media influencer, she prided herself on her ability to spin stories that captured luxury and exclusivity. When Donovan walked into her orbit 6 months prior at a charity auction, she recognized him as the perfect opportunity for more than a mere fling. In Bali, her star shone brighter than ever. She live-streamed the lavish villa suite at the Ritz-Carlton, showcasing exquisite sunsets and sumptuous 5-course dinners. Donovan indulged her at every turn: private spa treatments, exclusive yacht excursions, and even a personal driver to ferry them to hidden waterfall spots for romantic rendezvous. Marissa milks these opulent moments for her social media channels, her following skyrocketing with each post. She added the hashtags #VaqueGoals and #JetSetLife to tantalize her growing audience, all the while carefully masking Donovan's face to maintain a semblance of discretion. Behind her charming smiles, Marissa was constantly taking the measure of Donovan, calculating just how far she could push him to secure a future for herself. She listened closely when he talked about new business ventures, corporate expansions, and investment deals. And while Donovan reveled in the romance of the trip, Marissa's mind raced with possibilities. Could she solidify her position? Could she somehow transition from the other woman into Donovan's main focus and main beneficiary? The more Donovan drank in her presence, the more unguarded he became. Over candlelit dinners, he boasted about his latest coup, freezing his wife's accounts to remind her who held the power. Marissa hid her surprise behind a dazzling smile, filing away that important detail. If Donovan was this ruthless with his own wife, she wondered how far that ruthlessness might extend if their relationship ever soured. But for now, it suited her to stroke his ego, to laugh at his jokes, and to nod sympathetically at his descriptions of Cassandra's so-called emotional fragility. Yet Marissa sensed something else beneath Donovan's bravado, an undercurrent of volatility that could either make her rich or break her entirely. Cassandra's father, Henry Street, James, was an old money gentleman known for his stern, quiet dignity and unwavering moral compass. Though he had his reservations about Donovan from the start, he'd never interfered directly with his daughter's choices. Everyone has their path, he had once told Cassandra. But if you ever need me, I'll be there. Over the phone, Cassandra relayed the full extent of her troubles, the frozen credit cards, Donovan's disappearance, and her fears about the future of their marriage. Henry's reaction was calm, but she sensed the tension building in his measured breaths. After listening, he spoke in a near whisper. "Come to the estate, Cassandra. We need to talk in person." Cassandra, emotionally drained, decided to take her father up on his invitation. She travelled to the family's estate just outside Greenwich. The sprawling manor, nestled among immaculately tended gardens, was a familiar haven from her childhood, a place where she knew love was unconditional and support unwavering. Sitting across from him in the parlour, she poured out every detail she'd kept bottled up, including the rumours of Donovan's infidelity. Henry's mouth tightened. After a pause, he slid a manila folder across the antique mahogany coffee table toward her. "I asked a friend to do a little digging," he said softly. "Donovan has been funneling money into hidden international accounts for months now. Here are some preliminary bank statements from the Cayman Islands." Cassandra's world tilted. She thought she had been prepared for unpleasant surprises, but this was an entirely new level of betrayal. "He's moving money without my knowledge?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm afraid so," Henry replied. "This is serious, Cassandra. We need to protect you and the baby. We have to act quickly before more damage is done." She looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. This was no longer a petty marital dispute. Donovan's actions were systematically cornering her into financial oblivion. "What do we do?" she whispered. Henry's gaze was resolute. "We start by making sure he can't touch whatever resources you have left." Donovan's phone buzzed while he lounged by the private pool in Bali, sipping a top-shelf whiskey. He glanced at the screen and saw the name of his corporate attorney, Alec Grant. Initially, he considered letting it go to voicemail, but the attorney was persistent, calling again and again. Donovan excused himself from Marissa, who feigned a pout, and walked a few steps away to take the call. "What is it, Alec?" Donovan asked, irritation creeping into his voice. He had come here to escape responsibilities, not to juggle them. Alec's tone was clipped. "Cassandra's father retained counsel. They're filing a motion to unfreeze the funds you blocked. They're also looking into your offshore accounts. This is escalating quickly." Donovan bristled. "Let them try. Nothing they do can dismantle what I've built. The accounts are in my name." There was a slight pause. "They're also claiming breach of fiduciary duty within the marriage, Donovan. And there's talk of emotional distress." Henry Street, James is no small name in the legal and social circles. A rush of hot anger welled up. He had grossly underestimated his father-in-law's reach. Henry was known for his impeccable reputation and philanthropic endeavors, both of which gave him significant clout. Still, Donovan believed in his own cunning. He had orchestrated countless complex deals. He could handle a meddling father-in-law and a pregnant wife. "Stall them. I'll deal with it when I get back," he growled. He ended the call abruptly, ignoring Alec's request for more specifics. Setting the phone aside, Donovan returned to Marissa with a forced smile. He wouldn't let Henry Street James spoil his vacation. He had more pressing matters to attend to, like the finalization of a new business venture that he was bankrolling with his hidden funds. The plan was to buy into a high-yield import-export operation in Southeast Asia, one that promised enormous returns. Donovan flashed his mistress a confident grin. He wasn't about to let anyone block his path, and as far as he was concerned, Cassandra could wait. Confusion and sadness gave way to determination as Cassandra realized that the more she waited in agony, the more Donovan would exploit the situation. With her father's backing, she decided to seek legal counsel from Catherine Lowry, a renowned family law attorney who had won high-profile cases involving the wealthy elite. Sitting in Catherine's sleek midtown office, Cassandra felt a mixture of hope and fear, but mostly a growing resolve. Catherine listened carefully, her no-nonsense demeanor radiating competence. She asked pointed questions about the finances, the timeline of Donovan's suspicious behavior, and the details of their prenuptial agreement, if one existed. Cassandra explained that Donovan had insisted they sign no prenup, a fact that now seemed more like a trap than a romantic gesture. "That could actually work in your favor," Catherine remarked, tapping her pen against a legal pad. "But we need to move quickly. Have you given any thought to a legal separation or divorce filing?" Cassandra swallowed hard. The words hung in the air like a final bell toll. I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me wants to give him the chance to explain. But after everything he's done, I'm not sure I can forgive him, especially with a baby on the way." Catherine nodded. "We'll pursue immediate financial relief through the courts. I can file for spousal support and a freeze on Donovan's ability to move more assets offshore. In the meantime, you should also consider a protection order if you feel threatened." It was a lot to process, but Cassandra felt a steadiness in her chest that she hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time, she was taking action instead of passively waiting for Donovan to return. "Yes," she said softly, "let's do it. Let's protect my child and me." With that, she signed the necessary documents, unaware that she was taking the first bold steps toward reclaiming her life. Across Manhattan, whispers began to circulate. Social circles that once admired the Ashfords' glowing union now buzzed with rumors of a fracture. Gossip columnists at Page 6 caught wind of strange legal activity surrounding Donovan Ashford, which only fueled the speculation. There were even sightings of Cassandra entering the offices of a prominent divorce attorney, her belly visibly round beneath a stylish but subdued maternity dress. At first, the story was limited to hush-hush talk over cocktails, but soon, online forums dedicated to high society gossip fanned the flames. People who had once envied Cassandra's gilded lifestyle now found a twisted sense of schadenfreude in her predicament. "Did you hear? He cut off all her cards while she's pregnant." One social media user wrote, prompting a barrage of outraged replies. Henry Street James stood as a quiet guardian during this storm. He used his connections to keep the most vicious rumors from taking hold, but he knew he couldn't quell them entirely. He urged Cassandra to take a brief retreat to the family estate for some respite from the paparazzi. Reluctantly, she agreed, though her mind lingered on Manhattan. Meanwhile, Donovan had no idea how rapidly his reputation was deteriorating back home. He was too busy orchestrating deals in Southeast Asia and parading around Bali with Marissa on his arm. If he caught wind of any gossip, he assumed it was a fleeting sensation that would blow over. After all, he was Donovan Ashford. People forgot and forgave quickly, especially when there was money involved. Marissa, on the other hand, was keenly aware of the social media chatter. Her influencer network reached every corner of the internet. She saw the rumors and carefully calculated her next move. She reassured Donovan that everything was fine, while privately collecting screenshots and storing them away like ammunition. Who knew when she might need a leveraged exit plan? Underneath the glitz and tropical sunshine, fault lines were growing. Donovan's empire, financial, marital, and social, stood on the brink of collapse. All it would take was one unfortunate push to send everything tumbling down. Back in Manhattan, Cassandra was jarred out of a light nap by the doorbell's shrill chime. Expecting perhaps one of her father's assistants or another legal courier, she carefully rose to her feet, one hand on her belly, and shuffled to the door of the penthouse. She opened it to find a uniformed courier holding a small package. "For Miss S. Cassandra Ashford," he announced, requesting her signature on a digital pad. With a polite nod, he handed over the package and departed. Inside, Cassandra set the unmarked box on the kitchen counter. Her heart fluttered with nervous curiosity. She'd already received countless legal documents and threatening letters from Donovan's associates, but this package was different. No return address, no business card. Carefully, she unsealed it. Inside was a sleek folder, and within that folder were photographs. She flipped through them, her eyes widening in disbelief. Photo after photo showed Donovan arm in arm with Marissa in Bali, laughing over a romantic dinner, posing in front of a cliffside pool, strolling along a pristine beach under starry skies. Whoever took these pictures must have been following them discreetly, capturing intimate moments that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. At the bottom of the stack, a single slip of paper read, "You deserve to know the truth." From someone who believes in justice. Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. A mixture of anger, heartbreak, and relief coursed through her. Finally, undeniable proof of Donovan's affair, evidence that she wasn't imagining his treachery. Her fingers trembled as she carefully placed the photos back into the box. She felt strangely validated and yet profoundly hurt. Tears pooled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had wasted enough tears on Donovan. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She resolved that she would no longer be the passive, compliant wife. The time had come to confront Donovan's betrayal legally, financially, and if necessary, publicly. Within days of receiving the damning photographs, Cassandra and her attorney, Catherine Lowry, launched their legal offensive. First, they filed for spousal support and immediate unfreezing of marital assets in a family court. Accompanying their motions was a thick packet of evidence, including the photos of Donovan and Marissa, witness statements from staff who could attest to Donovan's absence and controlling behavior, and banking records that highlighted his suspicious offshore transfers. The media lapped it up. Tabloid headlines screamed, "Ashford scandal, pregnant wife strikes back." Online gossip channels buzzed with outrage, with many condemning Donovan's audacity. A few cynics tried to twist the narrative, implying Cassandra was a gold digger who couldn't handle the strains of high society. But the public largely rallied around the pregnant woman who had been so callously discarded. Catherine also reached out to Donovan's legal team, demanding that Donovan's presence be required in Manhattan for a court hearing. Initially, they tried to stall, claiming he was on a critical business trip, but a judge swiftly mandated that Donovan appear within a specified time frame to address the spousal support and asset freeze requests. Failure to do so could result in contempt of court charges. For Cassandra, these days were a whirlwind of depositions, affidavit signings, and strategy sessions. Yet, amidst the chaos, she felt a sense of empowerment that surprised her. She was no longer the naive wife waiting for scraps of attention from a dismissive husband. She was fighting for her dignity and for her unborn child. In Bali, Donovan received a flood of urgent messages from Alec Grant, urging him to return. Enraged, Donovan threw his phone onto a plush lounge chair, cursing under his breath. He'd planned to finalize his big Southeast Asian deal. Now he had to fly back to Manhattan to defend himself against a ridiculous lawsuit from his own wife. Marissa observed his outburst with feigned concern, silently measuring how this might benefit her in the long run. Reluctantly, Donovan booked the earliest flight back to New York, bracing himself for a battle. He arrogantly believed he could still control. When Donovan Ashford landed at JFK, the crisp New York air felt hostile compared to Bali's balmy breezes. He made his way to the penthouse with a simmering anger that twisted his features into a scowl. The city's skyline, once a symbol of his power, loomed ominously, as if judging him for his transgressions. By the time he unlocked the front door, he'd rehearsed a litany of accusations to hurl at Cassandra. She was ungrateful. She'd blown everything out of proportion. She was humiliating him. But the moment he saw her standing in the living room, visibly pregnant, clutching a folder of legal documents, the words knotted in his throat. Cassandra's gaze was steady, a quiet determination shining in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said calmly. Her posture spoke volumes. She was no longer the meek wife who would bow to his intimidation. Donovan sneered, feigning nonchalance. "So it's true you filed a suit. You're going to drag our marriage through the courts like some reality show." She held up the folder. "I have proof of your affair, Donovan, and I have records of your financial maneuvers. You froze my accounts without warning, right after I got pregnant. For what? To humiliate me? To keep me dependent on you?" His eyes flicked to the folder. "You never would have understood my business decisions. You're too emotional. And as for the affair, I won't dignify that with a response." Cassandra's voice trembled with a mix of anger and sadness. "This child, our child, deserves better, and so do I." Donovan stepped closer, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "Don't push me, Cassandra. I can make your life even harder." She refused to step back. "You've already done your worst, Donovan. Now it's my turn to fight back." The room crackled with tension. In that heartbeat of silence, the power dynamic between them visibly shifted. Donovan clenched his fists, realizing too late that the woman he thought he had under his thumb had finally, irrevocably, slipped free. Marissa Bloom arrived in New York a few days later, discreetly taking a room at a 5-star boutique hotel downtown. Donovan had insisted she remain in Bali until things cooled off, but she sensed that the real opportunities lay in Manhattan, where the legal battle was heating up. She was done being the secret side piece. If Donovan needed her, she would make herself available, but on her terms. Over a quiet lunch at the hotel restaurant, she met with a friend, an entertainment lawyer, who also dabbled in reputation management. She slid a stack of photographs across the table, images of her and Donovan, some even more intimate than the ones Cassandra received. "I need a plan," Marissa said, swirling her wine glass absently. "A strategy to either align myself properly or to extricate myself profitably." Her friend smirked. "Blackmail? Or just a negotiation tactic?" Marissa shrugged elegantly. "Call it what you will. Donovan seems distracted, even cornered. If he's going down in court, I need to ensure I'm not going down with him. I want to secure my future." The friend leaned in, lowering her voice. "Donovan is entangled in numerous business deals. If some of those deals fail, you could be left high and dry unless you hold leverage. These pictures could serve that purpose." Marissa nodded, her eyes glittering. She hadn't told Donovan she was in New York, and she didn't plan to. Not yet, anyway. Let him focus on the looming court date. Meanwhile, she would position herself to gain the upper hand. After their meeting, Marissa returned to her room and compiled a digital folder. She typed out an email to Donovan, attaching a single photo, one of him kissing her on the beach in Bali. No text, just the picture. A silent message that she was close by, armed with evidence of their affair, and ready to do what was necessary to protect her interests. When she hit send, she felt a calmness wash over her. This was the game she played best, the game of power, secrets, and survival. Cassandra's days had fallen into a tense, repetitive pattern. Check in with her legal team, endure morning sickness at unpredictable hours, and make time for her prenatal appointments. Ever since Donovan cut her off and fled to Bali, her once glittering world now revolved around court documents, closed-door negotiations, and urgent calls with her father, Henry Street James. Yet, amidst this whirlwind, she found herself blessed with a small, loyal circle of allies who helped her stand stronger than she ever thought possible. Mia and Ingrid were her constant friends who provided both solace and strategy. Mia juggled her own busy schedule to meet with Cassandra almost daily, using her contacts in the press to shape a more accurate public narrative. She fed information to sympathetic journalists, painting a picture of a pregnant woman trapped by a vindictive husband, all while avoiding sensationalism that could harm Cassandra's case. Ingrid, meanwhile, proved invaluable in managing practicalities. She handled everything from scheduling to personal errands and never left Cassandra's side during doctor visits. When a wave of nausea or an onrush of tears hit, Ingrid was there, offering gentle words and a steady hand. But one afternoon, an unexpected voice reached out. Jameson Pierce, a talented fashion designer Cassandra had met a few years prior. They'd once exchanged playful banter backstage at a charity runway show. He had teased her about her unwavering kindness, warning that it could be both her greatest strength and her biggest vulnerability in a ruthless industry. Still, there'd always been mutual respect and a hint of professional chemistry. Over lunch at a sunlit Upper East Side cafe, Jameson studied Cassandra carefully, noting the weight she carried far beyond her pregnancy. She wore minimal makeup, and despite her designer coat, the strain in her posture was unmistakable. "I've been following the headlines," he began gently, drumming his fingers against a porcelain coffee cup. "I'm sorry for everything you're going through. I reached out because I believe there might be a silver lining here, even if it's hard to see." Cassandra exhaled slowly. "I appreciate that. But right now, it's tough to think about anything beyond surviving day by day." Jameson leaned forward, a spark of excitement in his voice. "You've put your fashion dreams on hold for Donovan, for the marriage, and now for your baby. But you have a reputation people in the industry still remember your debut collection for that small boutique line last year. You earned fans for your refined style and attention to detail. That goodwill hasn't vanished." She frowned, a little skeptical. "I just don't see how I can launch a whole new project while I'm wrapped up in this legal battle." With a reassuring smile, Jameson waved a hand dismissively. "Let me take on the heavy lifting. I have access to resources and business contacts who would love to work with you. And we can start small, maybe a limited maternity capsule collection or an online blog documenting your journey. If it resonates, we grow it into something bigger. You need independence, and this could be your stepping stone." The idea stirred a flutter of possibility in Cassandra's mind. For weeks, she'd been consumed by Donovan's betrayals and her own vulnerability, feeling like a spectator in her own life. Now, Jameson was handing her a chance to reclaim her identity. "I do love the idea," she admitted, her eyes lighting up for the first time in ages. "But there's still so much to untangle legally and financially." Jameson spread his arms wide, as though to embrace her doubts. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, but you're not alone. Mia and Ingrid can help with press releases. Your father has connections that could ease logistical burdens, and I'd handle the creative and managerial side until you're ready to take the reins. It won't solve everything, but it could reintroduce you to the world on your own terms, not Donovan's." Cassandra sipped her tea, considering each word. The mere thought of focusing on something she loved, fashion, ignited a small but powerful spark of hope. "Let's start brainstorming," she said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'm tired of living in Donovan's shadow." Jameson's grin reflected her cautious optimism. That's the spirit. The world deserves to see what you can do, Cassandra, and so do you. They spoke for another hour, discussing possible brand names, design themes, and how to integrate her experience as an expectant mother into a relatable, empowering collection. By the time they parted, Cassandra's steps felt lighter. She clutched Jameson's business card as though it were a lifeline, aware that this budding plan was more than a career move, it was an assertion of her own resilience. Later that evening, as she curled up on her sofa, financial documents, legal files, and prenatal vitamins scattered around her, Cassandra realized that Donovan's power over her was no longer absolute. She had allies who believed in her, a father who stood ready to protect her, and her own untapped strength. If Donovan's cruelty had taught her anything, it was that she would never again allow herself to be so completely silenced. Her unborn child kicked softly, a reassuring nudge from within. Cassandra placed a hand over her belly and whispered, "We'll be okay." It wasn't just a mantra, it was a promise to herself, to her baby, and to the life she planned to reclaim. The day of the hearing arrived with a tension so thick it was palpable. The family court in Manhattan's lower courthouse became the stage where Donovan Ashford and Cassandra Ashford would play out their high-stakes drama. Journalists milled around the steps, snapping photos and shouting questions as Cassandra, flanked by Catherine Lowry and Henry Street James, arrived in a conservative yet elegant outfit. Despite the cameras, she carried herself with quiet poise, one hand protectively over her pregnant belly. Donovan arrived shortly after, accompanied by Alec Grant and 2 additional attorneys. His suit was immaculate, and he wore a cool expression that veered between arrogance and annoyance. As he strode by the reporters, he ignored every shouted inquiry. The tension in the hallway soared when Donovan and Cassandra locked eyes for the first time since their confrontation in the penthouse. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings began with arguments from both legal teams. Catherine presented a compelling case detailing Donovan's financial abuses, the sudden freezing of Cassandra's accounts, the offshore bank statements, and the photographs of his extramarital activities. She highlighted Cassandra's vulnerable state as an expectant mother with limited access to her own resources. Alec countered by portraying Cassandra as reckless with spending, suggesting that the credit freeze was a necessary measure to protect the family's finances. He danced around the infidelity issue, insisting that it was irrelevant to the immediate legal question of spousal support. Donovan stared stonily ahead, refusing to make direct eye contact with Cassandra. But the judge, an astute woman with a reputation for fairness, seemed unimpressed by Donovan's arguments. She zeroed in on the fact that Cassandra's credit lines were cut off without warning or legitimate cause. She questioned the validity of Donovan's rationale, noting that none of his so-called protections appeared in any prior financial discussions or prenuptial agreements. After hours of testimony and legal sparring, the judge called for a recess. The mood in the room was electric. Media outlets were already crafting their headlines. For Cassandra, it felt like the world was finally witnessing Donovan's cruelty, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the slightest glimmer of vindication. While Donovan fixated on winning the courtroom battle, a different crisis brewed behind the scenes, one that threatened his business empire. His major investment in Southeast Asia had hit a catastrophic snag. The import-export venture he bankrolled was facing allegations of fraud and money laundering. Regulators in 2 countries were investigating, freezing assets, and seizing records. Donovan's name surfaced prominently due to his hefty financial contributions. His phone lit up incessantly with calls from his partners, panicked messages about government raids and legal injunctions. Stress wrapped around him like a vice. Donovan had counted on this deal to position him for future expansions and massive returns, But now it was on the brink of collapsing. To make matters worse, the offshore accounts that Donovan believed were safeguarded had come under intense scrutiny thanks to Henry Street James's legal reach. Henry's contacts had flagged Donovan's name to international finance watchdogs, ensuring that his finances were under the microscope. Suddenly, Donovan found himself at the epicenter of multiple investigations, personal, marital, and financial. In the quiet corners of his mind, Donovan felt an inkling of panic. He always prided himself on being 2 steps ahead, weaving elaborate strategies that kept him on top. But now, the playing field was shifting under his feet. His trusted circle of allies began to distance themselves. Associates who once clamored for Donovan's attention now declined his calls, afraid of being tainted by his unraveling reputation. Back at the penthouse, Donovan paced the marble floors, ignoring the swirling dust motes illuminated by the afternoon sun. He had no shortage of wealth in other places, but the noose was tightening. If the Southeast Asian deal imploded and the courts awarded Cassandra a substantial settlement, he stood to lose not just money, but the image he so carefully curated. Through clenched teeth, he muttered curses about betrayals and ungrateful partners. In his mind, this was all someone else's fault, Cassandra's, Henry's, the so-called incompetent business partners. But what truly haunted him was the terrifying realization that his empire, like a house of cards, was about to collapse. Marissa Bloom had been watching from the sidelines, gathering intel as Donovan's situation deteriorated. Late one evening, she summoned him to the rooftop bar of her swanky boutique hotel. Donovan arrived, looking ragged, dark circles under his eyes, tension pulling his shoulders taut. He ordered a whiskey, neat and settled into the plush seat across from her. So she began, swirling her own drink. "I hear things aren't going so well with your investment. And you're in court with Cassandra, fighting over money and reputation." She offered him a sympathetic pout. Donovan glared at her. "What's it to you?" Marissa leaned forward, setting her drink down. "I have certain assets in my possession," she said, alluding to the collection of incriminating photos, text messages, and perhaps more. Let's be honest, if Cassandra's lawyers got hold of them, it wouldn't just be about money. Your entire public image could be shredded, and any hope of minimizing your court losses would vanish. His eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. Marissa tilted her head, flashing a saccharine smile. "Not threatening, darling, proposing a mutual arrangement. I want to ensure I'm taken care of financially, enough to weather this storm if your whole empire falls. A safety net, if you will." The audacity of her demand simmered in the tense space between them. Donovan clenched his jaw. He had once believed he was the puppeteer and everyone else his marionette. Now Marissa was turning the strings back on him. "You realize I could ruin you too," he said, gripping his glass until his knuckles whitened. Marissa shrugged. "Ruin me how? I'm just a socialite influencer with no official ties to your business deals. If you go down, I'll move on. But if you take care of me, I keep these sensitive files out of the public eye. You choose." Donovan stared at her, a toxic mix of anger and resignation pooling in his chest. He gave a curt nod. "Fine, we'll talk details." Marissa smiled. The game of leverage had only just begun. The next morning, Donovan's world came crashing down in a way he never thought possible. At precisely 7 a.m., law enforcement agents, accompanied by regulators, arrived at his office headquarters. They carried warrants to seize documents related to his overseas investments and potential money laundering charges. Employees gaped in shock as files were confiscated, computer systems locked, and office phones were examined. In the midst of this chaos, Donovan received a frantic call from Alec Grant. "They're freezing more assets. The authorities suspect you knew about the fraudulent nature of the Southeast Asian deal." Your accounts are under immediate review. What? Donovan roared, slamming a fist on the nearest surface. I had no idea. This is insane. But deep down, he knew he'd been playing with fire, trusting questionable partners for the sake of higher returns. Now he was paying the ultimate price. News vans and reporters swarmed the building's entrance, eager for a statement. Donovan felt cornered, every camera lens capturing his scowl and wide-eyed panic. He tried to mask his fear with anger, barking orders at security to clear the media. It only fueled their feeding frenzy. By midday, the stock price of Donovan's publicly traded enterprises plummeted, shareholders dumping shares in a panicked exodus. His business empire, once the envy of Manhattan, was hemorrhaging capital. Calls from board members demanded an emergency meeting to address the scandal. Investors threatened class action lawsuits. To compound the disaster, Cassandra's legal team received a tip, possibly from Marissa, that Donovan was about to face federal charges, making spousal support negotiations tilt heavily in Cassandra's favor. The court swiftly granted an injunction, ensuring that Donovan could not move or hide any more assets without facing contempt. Sitting in his office, blinds drawn, Donovan buried his head in his hands. He had lost control of his finances, his marriage, even his mistress. Everything he had taken for granted was slipping away at breakneck speed. Across town, Cassandra learned of these developments through her lawyer, a strange mix of relief and sadness washing over her. He had reaped the whirlwind he'd sowed, and karma was proving merciless. In the weeks that followed, Donovan's downfall accelerated. Official charges of financial misconduct were filed, and a grand jury assembled to review his case. His once glamorous name now adorned headlines, linking him to scandal and potential jail time. Marissa quietly distanced herself, negotiating a discreet settlement for her silence. Even so, the tabloids caught wind of her existence, painting her as yet another symbol of Donovan's dubious character. While Donovan struggled under the weight of his crumbling empire, Cassandra walked a path toward healing and self-discovery. Buoyed by her father's unwavering support, she moved out of the penthouse and into a modest but beautiful apartment closer to her obstetrician. The space was small, but it felt like a sanctuary, her own space, free from the echoes of Donovan's control. She partnered with Jameson Pierce to begin conceptual work on a maternity fashion line, turning her heartbreak into creativity. Each design was a testament to resilience and empowerment, a celebration of mothers who refused to be overshadowed. Offers from niche brands and online retailers trickled in, proving she could stand on her own feet financially. Cassandra also found an unexpected sense of closure when, late one night, Donovan sent a text. It was short and hollow. "I'm sorry for everything. I made mistakes." She stared at the screen, her emotions tangled between pity and anger. After a moment, she powered off her phone. She had no interest in continuing the cycle of manipulation and pain. Eventually, Donovan's frozen assets were divided under court supervision. Cassandra secured a settlement that would provide well for her child, while Donovan faced an uncertain future that involved potential prison time and financial ruin. In what felt like poetic justice, the very steps Donovan had taken to isolate and control, Cassandra had led to his own downfall. On a bright spring morning, Cassandra gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Surrounded by loved ones, she cradled her newborn, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. She named him Henry James Ashford, an homage to her father and a message of renewal. No matter what the future held, she was ready to face it, free from the shackles of Donovan's tyranny. And there you have it, a cautionary tale of greed, betrayal, and the fierce strength it takes to break free from a toxic partnership. In a world obsessed with wealth and glamour, Donovan Ashford discovered that money can't shield you from the consequences of your own actions. He thought he held all the cards, but karma dealt the final hand. Meanwhile, Cassandra's journey from controlled, vulnerable wife to empowered, independent mother reminds us that true resilience and courage often emerge from our darkest moments. If this story gripped your heart, made you gasp, or left you cheering for Cassandra's triumph, be sure to hit that like button. Share this video with friends who love a good twist of fate. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the hidden dramas behind the glossy facades of the rich and powerful. Your support keeps these tales coming.